Well, in a move by the centre that's both massive and historic, the Jammu and Kashmir state has lost its special status. The provisions of Article 370, which gave special status to Jammu and Kashmir, have been revoked. As a result, Article 35A, which gave the residents special rights over jobs and acquiring property in the state, also ceases to exist. The changes will come into effect immediately. Of course, in the other big move, the state has been bifurcated. Jammu and Kashmir now become a union territory with a legislator. Ladakh becomes a union territory with no legislator. This is, of course, the biggest story of the day. Mr. Yashwant Sinha, former finance minister and external affairs minister, joins me right now live on Mirror Now. Mr. Sinha, good evening and thank you for joining us. This is Faye D'souza from the Mirror Now studio. There are two parts to today's decision. One is the merit of the decision itself. The other is the manner in which the decision has been brought about. And I want to go through this one by one. I want you to first tell us what you believe as a manner in which this decision was brought about. Do you believe it was constitutional? Several members of the opposition say that the Constitution and Parliament were completely ignored and insulted. Do you agree with them?
I would tend to agree with that view because the manner in which the legislation has been brought, you are aware that it was suddenly sprung upon Rajya Sabha at 11 o'clock in the morning, and then a discussion was started on a very momentous piece of legislation which is not merely relating to the status of Jammu and Kashmir as it existed, it has existed in the last 70 years, but also it destroyed the state as we know it. It has dismembered the state, and the state has not only vanished, but it has been reduced in status to that of an union territory. Jammu and Kashmir minus Ladakh is UT, as you said, with legislature. Ladakh is union territory without legislature. So, which means what? It means that we don't know yet what the division of responsibilities be between the Lieutenant Governor and the elected legislature in Jammu and Kashmir. But whatever it may be, we know from experience what is happening in Delhi. We know from experience what's happening in Puducherry between the Lieutenant Governor and the elected Chief Minister. So, whatever steps the Government of India has taken and is getting through in Rajya Sabha, it will get through in Parliament, is quite clearly fraught with all kinds of dangers for the future. This is one point. So, the method is questionable. It is dubious, and it should be challenged. Somebody, I'm sure, is going to challenge it in a Supreme Court, which was already seized of some of the issues. And then let's see what the judiciary pronounces on these issues. But as far as I am concerned, I think the method adopted is very, very dubious.
Mr. Sinha, you also just said that it's destroyed the state as we know it. It's reduced it to a union territory and it's fraught with danger. So if we actually examine the decision itself of removing 370, now removing Article 370 has been in the manifesto of the BJP, has been an aim of the BJP for many decades, including for when you were part of the party yourself. Do you believe that it is a good decision and it will lead to lower violence and better development in the state?
That's what the government claims. But, the reality has been brought out starkly by the events of today. The valley of Kashmir is under a clampdown. It appears as if there is a martial law in the valley. And the step by the government is being celebrated in the rest of the country. Now, this brings out the very sharp divide that exists with regard to the feelings with respect to Article 370 in parts of India and in Jammu and Kashmir, especially the Valley of Kashmir.
Well, Mr. Sinha, from an external affairs point of view, if you were to examine the various things that have happened over the last couple of months, including Mr. Trump making two mentions of the possibility of him intervening, his plan of moving out of Afghanistan, his meetings with Imran Khan in Washington, would you say that this move right now strengthens our position on Kashmir in relations to America and Pakistan at this point?
No, it weakens it.
How so?
It weakens it because three, four things have happened. You're aware of what the Secretary General of the UN said about the situation in Jammu and Kashmir. We have criticized him, but he has stated what he thinks is his view. Then we are aware of the Human Rights Commission in Geneva, its approach to the human rights violations by the government of India in Kashmir. Then we come to Trump. Now, I don't believe the Prime Minister would have told Trump to mediate. No Indian Prime Minister would say that. But at the same time, by repeating that offer, Trump, it appears, is willing to jump into this issue and is willing to mediate between Pakistan and India. And what is more important is the fact that Pakistan is not going to take it lying down. It will, I'm sure it will knock at every door at the UN. And the Jammu and Kashmir issue, perhaps, will therefore not remain a bilateral issue between India and Pakistan. The danger is it might be internationalized. And I'll not be surprised at all, given the character that Trump has displayed in the White House, if he says US will intervene and mediate between India and Pakistan. And if you say no, then you are on the wrong side of the Americans and the United Nations.
Mr. Sinha, also we've had the Home Minister speak in Rajya Sabha and in Lok Sabha. He's talked about how several of the wrongdoings that have taken place, or the lack of development, the murders that have happened, the lack of education, the lack of infrastructure, several of these things he's attributed to Article 317. He said all of that will change right now. It is really largely the political families of Jammu and Kashmir that have held the people back. Now, the relationship with the local people of Kashmir has always also been a delicate relationship that India has had to manage. Do you believe that the activity of the last 48 hours has perhaps endangered that delicate relationship?
Yes, I do. Otherwise, we would not have seen the unprecedented clampdown that we are seeing both in the valley as well as in Jammu. It's not merely that very large number of security forces are there out in the streets. It's not merely that the streets are deserted. It's not merely that curfew has been imposed, but all means of communication, cell phones, internet, everything has been disconnected. You can't reach the people of Jammu or the people of Kashmir. Why? If it is such a favorable step for them, why haven't we been able to carry conviction with them and tell them that it is in their interest? I believe that we have used a tope to swat a fly. I mean, which part of India is a developed part of India? Isn't there poverty, deprivation, suffering in Jharkhand, in parts of Orissa, in parts of Madhya Pradesh, in parts of UP, in parts of other parts of the country? So to say that Article 370 and 35A were responsible for the non-development of Jammu and Kashmir is something which I'll find laughable. And that their removal is going to bring heaven to the people of Jammu and Kashmir. If it is so, then why hasn't the government carried conviction with the people of Jammu and Kashmir, and why aren't they celebrating and beating the drum in the streets of Srinagar?
Mr. Sinha, the opposition here, whether it be the local, the regional parties in Kashmir, that the leaders of whom were placed on house arrest, or the parties in the parliament, found themselves largely unable to do anything. Do you believe that this was keen political strategy by the government to be able to find that right moment, the right loopholes, given the fact that legally this article cannot be removed without a clearance from the committee in the assembly, but there's no committee in the assembly because there's no state government. As a result, there was an interesting loophole there that the government used to just basically get the president's signature.
Quite right. I mean, the Article 370 itself has a proviso which clearly lays down that it can only be done with the approval of the Constituent Assembly of Jammu and Kashmir. Now, there is no Constituent Assembly, so at least the Assembly's approval should have been taken. But there is no Assembly either. There is the governor. And who is the governor? The governor is an appointee of the central government, and he represents not the people of Jammu and Kashmir, but represents only the government of India. So how can it be said that he represents the will of the people and his consent or approval is sufficient to meet the constitutional requirement? I think when this matter is agitated before courts of law, then this will be a very important point there, that you cannot ride roughshod over the provisions of our constitution and say the governor will represent the people of that state. And it sets a very dangerous precedent because this is something which can be repeated in any state of India.
But from what you understand, the Rajya Sabha has been adjourned for the day and the bill has passed, I think, in Lok Sabha. We'll bring you more updates about that. But Mr. Sinha, when you say that this basically is running roughshod over our constitutional provisions, are you calling this undemocratic?
No, there are two different things. One is unconstitutionality. Any democratic government has the obligation to abide by the Constitution. The other is the manner in which this whole thing has been carried in the upper house, the Rajya Sabha. And, the majority has been manufactured. We know what is happening to the supreme leader of the BSP. There are so many people who are under investigation by the investigating agencies of the government, and they are clearly surrendering before the might of the government of India.
Well, Mr. Sinha, you mentioned a couple of times that this would probably wind up in court one way or the other. Do you believe that this move by the government would hold in the court of law? Would it survive scrutiny of the court of law?
I personally believe it will not stand judicial scrutiny. And a legal constitutional view will clearly go against the government of India. But more importantly than what the judicial pronouncement ultimately will be, is the manner in which the people of Jammu and Kashmir, especially of the valley, have been treated. I mean, we are promising, as I said earlier, the heaven for them. And they are not interested in this kind of heaven.
Well, Mr. Sinha, if I may just change gears for a moment, because while I have the opportunity to speak with you, and I understand if you need to get a glass of water, but I also want to ask you a couple of questions on the economy, because in all of this, the thing that has been ignored completely or has not been answered, questions that haven't been answered, is to do with the economy. The markets are in a continuous tailspin. The Nifty and the Sensex were down even today. The Sensex lost about over 400 points. The Nifty was down about 134 points. Industry leaders, including the chairperson of India's largest bank, SBI, HDFC's chairperson, Deepak Parekh, L&T's A.M. Nayak, many have actually come forward now to say India is witnessing an unprecedented slowdown. We're losing jobs across several sectors. The auto industry, for example, is in its worst, what they're calling their worst ever slowdown. Do you think the government has perhaps not paid enough attention to this, or have their moves failed?
There is a school of thought, Faye, and I agree with them, which believes that this sudden move on Jammu and Kashmir is been taken in order to divert attention from the economic issues that the country is facing. I mean, for the last 3-4 days, you and everybody else has been talking about nothing but the unprecedented situation in Jammu and Kashmir, and this debate will go on for many more days. In the meanwhile, the economy is going from bad to worse. And you mentioned some of the issues. I believe that it is not only an unprecedented slowdown, it is not that every sector or almost every sector of the economy is in a mess today, but government is telling untruth to the people. Ratin Roy, who is a member of the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council, he has pointed out how there is a hole of 1,70,000 crore rupees in the budget on the receipt side, which is bound to reflect on the expenditure side. And the finance minister has gotten away in parliament with blue murder. I mean, every statistics that is meted out by or dished out by this government is completely lacking credibility.
Well, Mr. Sinha, if we consider these points one by one, and it's interesting, and I have heard some rumors, but the truth is, even after the entire Kashmir move comes and goes, the slowdown will not change. And I'm interested right now in what's going on with our economy. In your opinion, jobs has been a focus for us personally on this channel for over a year. And we perhaps have never seen it go this bad, because the big employers of our country, which is real estate, infrastructure, agriculture, the auto industry, auto ancillary industries, they've all either come to a grinding halt or have slowed down tremendously. The truth is, how much will the rural economy be able to hold before it collapses completely, Mr. Sinha?
I agree with you entirely. And as far as the rural economy is concerned, the monsoons have not been up to the mark in many parts of the country. There is either drought or there are floods, and therefore even rural demand will suffer as a result of this. But for many years now, there has been lack of demand, consumption demand as well as investment demand in our economy. And as a result of that, there is no investment in our economy. As a result of that, NPAs of the banks have accumulated to an extent which has been alarming. All these issues have been there piling up over the last 5 years. And the government has thought it fit not to deal with them, but only tell the people untruths so that people would be with the government. And that's what happened. Let me also tell you that the only economic issue which has a direct electoral impact is price rise. And there, fortunately, the government has been very lucky, because international crude prices have not gone through the ceiling. They are still moderate, around $60-62, and therefore they have been able to hold the price line. And that is why economic issues could not become issues during the last election. But at the same time, this crisis that we are seeing in our economy, in sectors of the economy, is bound to come to the notice of the people, the common people, and they are bound to suffer if they are not suffering already. It's not merely jobs. I mean, the farmers of this country, they are in a mess. And if they were not in a mess, why would the government think in terms of giving them the Kisan Samman money? So they are using Band-Aid in order to resolve very difficult economic issues. What is even worse is that the global economic situation is not going to help. The global economy is also in a mess with all kinds of funny decisions being taken by Trump with regard to trade with China, with regard to trade with India, and elsewhere. So the global situation is not going to help. The domestic situation is in very poor health, and we can look forward to some very bad times on the economic front.
Mr. Sinha, the government has set itself a target of a $5 trillion economy, and this phrase gets used a lot. And the government seems fairly confident of achieving this target. Do you believe the target is achievable now?
$5 trillion. You go and ask the man in the street, does he understand what a trillion means? And dollars. I mean, does he know very much about dollars? The point is, this government specializes in showing unachievable dreams to the people. And because they have the control of the means of communication, their message goes directly to the people, they are misled. But this cannot go on forever. 5 trillion economy is neither here nor there. Will 5 trillion economy bring bread to the people, to the people who are not well off? Will 5 trillion economy get them whatever they want? Employment, houses, electricity?
Mr. Sinha, my last question to you is about what is being called tax extortion or tax terrorism. Post the fairly unfortunate death of VG Siddhartha of Cafe Coffee Day, several people have come forward, including Mr. Mohandas Pai of Infosys, formerly of Infosys, Kiran Majumdar Shaw and several others, talking about the fact that the income tax department is harassing not just not just entrepreneurs, but also people who run businesses. Do you believe that this has gotten worse over the last few years for whatever reason? Or is it because the government is now looking at a zero corruption system that people are feeling the heat?
No, it's nothing to do with corruption or eliminating corruption. This is tax terrorism, pure and simple. When we were in the opposition and the UPA was in power, I remember all of us used to speak about the tax terrorism which was unleashed from time to time by the UPA government. And we promised the people of this country that if the BJP or NDA were to come to power, there will be no tax terrorism. But what we are witnessing today is the worst form of tax terrorism than anything practiced by the UPA. I mean, the income tax department has gone berserk, and they are what shall I say? I mean, they are harassing people. Some of them are speaking out. Many of them are not speaking out for further fear of the income tax department. But it's a very, very serious situation. It is unfortunate that this government does not believe in running the country in cooperation with businesses. It treats business now and business people as enemies and is treating them like one.
Well, Mr. Sinha, I want to first thank you for your time and for sharing your thoughts so candidly here on Mirror Now. We appreciate having this conversation with you. Yashwant Sinha, former External Affairs Minister and Finance Minister, talking to us about both of these moves, the Jammu and Kashmir decision made by the government and, of course, the slowdown that we're currently seeing in our economy. We're going to take a quick break here on Mirror Now. We'll come back on the other side with more news and updates. Don't go anywhere.